Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service. I'm going to do something a little different today, and hopefully it doesn't get overly complicated. I'm going to try to start to work with dementia and Alzheimer's. But in order for us to look at dementia or Alzheimer's in a chart, we're going to have to also address a few other factors like psyche, which is also emotional wounding, but it deals with the brain. It also means dealing with penile, or the pineal gland. It means Bactivera, which is the head, Koph for the head. So there's a lot of different asteroids here that we're going to be working with. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible so that I'm introducing to you a small group rather than overwhelming you with a huge group of asteroids. But as I begin this process, and I might do another chart, this one we're going to be looking at, there is Alzheimer's as well as dementia. I can tell you that this gentleman has passed away. He did have vascular dementia, and we could talk about that. But I also want to point out that this particular individual's wife has Alzheimer's. So sometimes when we see things in a chart, it isn't always just referring to us. It can also refer to people around us or family members, and we're going to see where this is a hereditary disease. I was going to do both charts. I just think it would be an overwhelming amount of information. So what I'm probably going to do is divide the charts into two works. Mostly what I want this to be is an introduction to medical astrology, as well as an introduction into some of the more common asteroids that we're going to be using in medical astrology. For example, if you're talking about your head, so we're talking about Galvani or Koph or Bactivera, what we're talking about is the head, which means it can also be referring to things like head injuries, head traumas. I happen to be using this for a dementia patient, and where I'm going to be bringing up some of the dementia and Alzheimer's asteroids such as Frank, Block. But you also have to look at what causes Alzheimer's. Well, in the cases that I'm looking at, Orsted has a lot of value, a lot of importance. And what that means is that there's an overabundance of heavy metals or aluminum in the brain, and that will cause the problem. So before I begin, as always, I want to thank you for watching the video. I want to do a special thank you, of course, for all of my subscribers. If you're not a subscriber, I hope you'll consider becoming one. But if you would, like, share, because those things really build up the algorithms, also spreads the word. But also comment, because I'd really love to hear from you. Any addition to what I'm saying, because I know there's a few people out there that really study the asteroids, and it's really fun to have them comment on my work. So with that said, I do want to talk about some of the causes, but understand that as we, even my age, and I'm old, okay, I'm an older person, but I know in my heart, I also know astrology, that by 2030, there's going to be a lot of medical breakthroughs because of the amount of work that's already been done in the arena of Alzheimer's and dementia. It is very likely that they will have conquered it for most of us by the time we get old enough for this disease. It is genetic. It does seem to run in families. One of the issues would be that sometimes it doesn't show up because prior family members didn't live long enough. Now, in the case that I'm going to be talking about, and it's going to be for both individuals if I were to get to the second one, and I could mention it again when I get there, it is hereditary, and it was prevalent in the generation prior to the generation that got it. Ironically, it is a huge interest to me, though I don't seem to have there's no family history of it, even when people live long enough for some reason. And the only reason I can attribute it to is let's. So I had to cut out. We had sirens going everywhere. So with that said, okay, so when you look at the dementia concepts, it does run in some families. It's more prevalent in some charts than others, but it is something that I do believe they will be finding solutions for in our lifetime. But it is a great way to learn about the asteroids, but also to begin to understand how medical astrology works. And one of the other things I want to point out about the cases that I'm working on is that we're going to be coming across an asteroid called Akita, and it is a high glutamate, or it's a glutamate, which is a neurotransmitter. So one of the things about studying the medical is that you start to begin to get into some of the genes. We have a Swain here in this chart, which is an ERB, capital B dash 1 gene. Okay, it again, there's a lot of stuff that comes up in the genes. This will be corrected because they are working on what's referred to as a CRISPR, which is a medical term for them being able to work with our genes, probably in the womb. So they're going to be able to correct a lot of this. So I do want to point this out, though, in the chart that we're going to be looking at, Swain, which is the asteroid that I'm using for the ERBB-1 gene, is opposite Saturn. And it means that that gene is probably restricted in some way, or is somehow Saturned. It is opposing Saturn, so that gene is affected. The other opposition here is to an asteroid called Berger. And this is just a taste of what I've been looking at. I have tons of notes on this. I am going to go through this with the chart, but I just kind of want to give you an idea of what it is, okay? So we also have Berger, which is about tests that are used to evaluate brain disorders. And I can tell you that not only is Saturn opposite Swain and Berger, but Volcanus for pressure is there. And remember, he had dementia, vascular dementia. So there was probably a lot of pressure on the brain. Okay, and he was tested for that. I can tell you that there was an overabundance of aluminum. I can tell you that the glutamate, the transmitter issue, whether it be too high or too low, it can cause issues. And it can also be a determining factor in cancers, ironically. And believe it or not, one of the reasons why this can happen is needing more vegetables, which I found utterly amazing. And yet I knew how this person ate, particularly latter parts of his life. And there were absolutely zero vegetables. Okay, so this is like really interesting stuff, because if we understood more from an astrology perspective, somebody could have studied this chart when this was a young man and told him he better develop a taste for vegetables, because it would later in life could affect his brain. I mean, you know, everything's 20/20 in hindsight, but it really is a big deal. Okay, so you're saying to yourself, wow, these are a lot of asteroids, and how do you figure out what would or wouldn't cause Alzheimer's? And for example, there is a golden triangle, and what that means is that there is, with the sun, which in this case is 16 degrees of Leo, almost 17 degrees of Leo. But it is with block at 16 degrees of Sagittarius, and penal at 15, almost 16 degrees of Gemini. And Pluto also shows up here at 17 degrees of Cancer. So you see how closely they are, even though they're all in different signs, and you have one real square in there, which is the sun. The sun to block. I'm sorry, one real trine. Because, you think of a golden triangle, you think of a trine. So excuse my verbiage there. So with that said, okay, you would want to look at how the life is going to be transformed through Block, which is a dementia asteroid. Also with Block, there's a health asteroid, and Pluto tells you there will be a lot of transformation. Okay, then you have Williams and Frank is Alzheimer's. And it's really interesting because Frank makes a real square. That's the one that makes the real square at 16 of Scorpio. And it's still in the golden triangle, but now it's also going to be in the sun axis. Okay. And Frank is more of Alzheimer's, but I can tell you that this particular person's spouse did at the time, same time maybe even. We're not sure because we think that it was going on a lot longer than we knew. And she has Alzheimer's. Then it goes on, and Frank is there, as I said, but so is Williams for self-destructive behavior, because that's what Williams is. It's a little bit like Aragon. And I could tell you that this particular person did get very self-destructive with vascular dementia. He had to be put into a special ward, actually. I can also tell you that Orsted, which is aluminum, was also there. And so you can see where there's this, you can start to see, and this is all the sun axis, and it's all related to the sun, so that we know that there is a probability, a strong probability, that this man is going to deal with these things and they will transform him in his lifetime. A lot of sirens today. Well, anyway, the last asteroid that I want to talk about before we actually look at the charts is and I want to talk about the Mercury axis, because of course the Mercury is the brain, right? But in the sun axis, the last thing that I have listed is Langley. And Langley is the central nervous system, which is strongly affected by Alzheimer's and dementia and all of the above. So this is really important when you're looking at a chart. One of the things that I would suggest, and I do medical work for private clients, is that I usually do, even if you're not sick and you're just coming to me because you want some medical work done, and I've done this for people for eating disorders, and I've done it for particularly things where, like thyroid issues, where foods can be a big factor. And I can tell you that one of the first things I like to do is a sun workup. So you're looking at 1,000+ asteroids, if not more. And you're literally looking for things that would fall in the sun axis. And then you go through them and you pick out relevant factors, because there's so much in a chart. And in this case, it was very sad to see, actually, when we first got all these diagnoses, that this stuff really popped in these charts. So the other thing that I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to do this in the chart, is the Mercury aspect, because obviously Mercury is our thinking brain. Okay, that's why Psyche is also important, because it's part of the brain. That's why Bactivera, that's why Galvani, that's why Kof, that's why Carpi. They're all the head. And they are going to be critical in terms of axis points in the chart. But really, the most important one for dementia or Alzheimer's or any of the above would be, of course, Mercury, the thinking head. Because what is most affected is the thinking head. Okay? I know I had done a chart of Bruce Willis and his disorder, which is also a head disorder. And so you see where the head and all the asteroids related to the head become extremely important when you're researching certain disorders or certain diseases. Okay? The football players get a disease also that we can really see that in astrology. So one of the things that I really want to hopefully get through to you through all of this medical work that I do sporadically is show you how accurate the asteroids can be when it comes to working with the health of our bodies. And also, just note this as well, that because of genetic therapies that are going to be coming into us in the next 10 years, or actually it's less than 10 years now, that's the Hades Chronos effect. I can tell you that there are a lot of genetic gene type things that they're going to be able to see ahead of time that we can also see in astrology. We can tell if somebody is prone to breast cancer. We can tell if they're prone to cancer of the prostate or of the ovaries. There are genes that highlight these factors. So yes, doctors now have tests to see if you have the gene, but we can do it without even knowing your name, with no invasive surgeries at all. But we can still do the same thing by finding the BRCA genes. So with all of that said, let's go in and look at this chart and look at particularly the Mercury aspect, which in this case will have a health asteroid. It will have Jupiter with Orsted, so we have an excess of aluminum. Pluto, because it's changing your life, Cove, and Psyche. So it's something in the head that is affecting the psyche. And so it's quite telling. So let's go and have a look at that axis. And I'm going to go through some of my other notes on here. I have a lot of notes with this. I don't know that I'm going to go through everything. I truly do not want to confuse you. My objective in this is just to kind of introduce the work, show you how mind-blowing it can be and how accurate it can be. It really is mind-blowing. In her work, Martha Lang Westcott, now of course you have to be a subscriber to the website in order to have access to her medical research, but one of the really, really cool things that she does in there is she actually writes out orders, which, you know, I've tried to do when I show you this stuff, but, you know, it'll be things like block, the midpoint of block, Hilidago equals Petrovek equals Torah, which again, to me, that's the not being able to speak and how it affects a person and can make them very angry. I got to tell you, I think that we experienced a little bit of that with the case that I'm looking at. But I think it's really important to look for things like Adamite for blockages. Here we have a blockages, Charcot to Adamite, and block to Valentine with Eros. So the flow of the blood effects. So you see what I mean? Like, I love that she does that. It really gives us something to look for. And by the way, the ERB, this is where I put the notes on that. ERB-B1 is a gene that it's gene signaling. So it's like genes that ignite other genes. Like it's a signal. And it also can be found in cancers, but it is closely associated with Alzheimer's. So, with that said, my teacher's name again is Martha Lang Westcott. If any of you who do asteroids are interested, it's a nominal fee every month, but her research is right out there, particularly for medical, because that's what she's written books on. I mean, she's written books on just asteroids, but she's also written books on brain tumors. She has written on cancer research. So she has done an incredible amount of research, and she works pretty exclusively in the medical field. She used to at one time do counseling work like I do for anything, you know. But I think that she has moved herself into more specialized medical work. So with that said, let's go look at this chart. Well, I'm looking over the chart. I know what I want to see on the dial. I have notes to check for the dial. But I thought maybe just taking a peek at the chart. Now, first of all, I just want to say to you that as we look at this chart, we could you know, unexpected things going downhill with regards to self-expression in the fifth house. It seems like it all makes sense, but I got to be honest with you, this is not a good chart. This person was born in 1928. He's passed on. And I have no idea what his exact time of birth was. So I wanted to explain that. If you notice the sun at the midheaven, it is obviously a midheaven chart. I did it for noon. I can tell you that there really, when I looked at this chart, I didn't really see anything. Okay, now this health asteroid does figure in, by the way, with the golden triangle. It's already there. Yeah, there it is. So there are certain things, but we're going to look at them through the chart, okay? Because I think that might be easier for us through the dial, I'm sorry, because the chart is not going to be accurate due to not having a really good time. Yes, we could still go into our reports and we could still pull up an aspect list, okay? But I'm not going to say that we're going to find what we're really looking for here, okay? Because we don't even really have anything that tells us, even with Mercury, though there is a great deal here with Mercury. It you know, it squares Jupiter, it's trining Saturn, trining Uranus. I mean, there's a lot of aspects here, trine Hades, but I really I don't want, well, and it parallels Zeus, so we know there's some kind of inflammation with the brain. Okay, that, but inflamed brains can be a lot of different things. I've seen inflamed brains, not this configuration, but something similar that actually, to me, led to eating disorders, for example. So it doesn't have to lead to dementia or Alzheimer's. That would depend upon the rest of the chart, including those asteroids. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I just wanted to explain that to you. I wanted to explain how we see that. One of the first things I had down, now I did promise that we would look at that Mercury aspect, and so, and we will, because Mercury's down here, and with Chiron, which is interesting. They are square though. Oh, it's Jupiter. Hold on, there it is. We have a Jupiter, Mercury, Chiron. So, which is also interesting. Okay, and look, there's look what falls here. Uranus, Saturn. Remember, we went through how Uranus and Saturn were both trining, and how about Hades, Saturn, deterioration that. And by the way, the dementia really did lead to the death. So the separation, the deterioration, that all really happened. But I think this was because of the excesses of the brain with Chiron. Okay, so the brain did not, in the end, act normally. So, and I want you to note this, psyche happens to be right there. Okay, so when I put in my notes, look at the psyche, okay, then you have to also note that we're also looking at Mercury. What's really interesting is that I always would think that, and here I am, this astrologer, so I would think, oh, wow, if you had psyche in aspect to Mercury, wouldn't that make you more psychic? I'm not saying the man didn't have intuitive abilities, but I don't think so. I mean, I knew him and I don't recall that. But I do think that there could have been some childhood traumas just because of the way he was that never left. And they were playing in a loop in his brain. That I would go with. So it just kind of wanted to show you that. Now, here, Psyche and Mercury also equal Astrea. There's the loop. There is no end. There is no resolution. And that is the truth. Once dementia came, there was no will or desire even to fight it. And I wonder if it doesn't have to do with that Mercury and Psyche. There was just absolutely, which was the most disappointing concept. So all of those factors are falling in this particular aspect. Now, the other place I looked was this area. Here we go. Here we go. Look at this. Here's the health asteroid. Here's Pluto. And here, do you see that? Okay. There is definitely a health aspect that transforms this particular person's life, and it's notice upon ascendant sun. That's a form of ascendant. So and it continues, and it's affecting the moon, and it's continuous because there's too much Jupiter, Mercury. Now, I got to be honest with you. I have a Jupiter square Mercury, so they would come very close onto the chart. But I got to be honest with you, and to me, and what it means in my chart is I just am always talking, or I can, as you've noticed. I did not notice that in this man, so it was not used in the same way. And maybe that was the psyche aspects. I don't know. Or the Chiron aspect. I don't know. Because that's what is different in mine versus his. Okay? So you got that Jupiter, Mercury, and you would think talk, and especially with Astrea, but that might have been true as a younger person. I did not know him then, but I can tell you that as an adult, I did not find that to be true. Which always makes me wonder how long each of the people that I'm going to be using for examples really had the disease that they have. Because I do not believe that people always catch either dementia or Alzheimer's when they first begin. And upon finding out the diagnosis, I wondered if I had ever known these people well, that they were already changed when I met them. So, with that said, I just want to run through some of these other notes, okay? Boy, do I have enough. Okay. Went through some of it, though. Okay. So, one of the Tomlinson is an asteroid that we use for vascular dementia, which, by the way, is very different than having regular dementia, because vascular dementia can make us very nasty, and it seems to put more pressure on the brain. It's vascular. But I do have to tell you that at 24 degrees of Leo, remember he's 16 degree of Leo, okay? So that's like a hit. And it is directly conjuncting his Cupido right here, okay? So he has vascular dementia, but look what else it hits. Adamitis. So he has vascular, there's your block, okay? And it's from the family. And it did cause him to withdraw terribly, 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 terribly. Okay. It's the it really is a situation, and we don't remember, we don't know when this man was born, what time. Almost any morning birth is going to make that conjunct the ascendant, by the way. And so there is a factor there. So, um, again, and we could go into this axis a little deeper. So we have this vascular dementia, which is just really just nasty, nasty stuff. And so let me do a little math here. So that was 56. I'm just going to kind of, it's 56 something, but I'm just going to, so that would be 30, I'm going to say about 33. Okay, so I'm going to take 2230 off. So here we are. Oh yeah, there is an ascendant there. See, I don't know if that's really his ascendant though. But look at the ascendants on both sides. Look at the panacea for solving problems. Yeah, I wonder if they really did also find some drugs for him because they had to medicate him because he would lose his temper. And here's something I wanted to show. So here's the temper, and here's the sun. So there's also a Taureau on this sun, and an I like this because I really feel we see a lot of Alzheimer's markers in here. His wife did come down with Alzheimer's, and I am predicting at around the same time he is diagnosed with dementia. Okay, so it really is. It's really in the chart. I mean, it just pops right up that this is how this is going to go. And so with that said, okay, so that's about 16 degrees. So the other point that we have on that, I have all this written down, is, oops, that's the wrong chart. That's the other chart. Here we go. Is, yeah, here we go. Yeah, we got that, and then it goes to here. And Vesta's there, but so is, here we go, Bhaktavara for head. Okay, so there is a head asteroid right there. So you see how it's a repeatable theme, and it keeps showing up. Williams is also there for self-destructive. It's because of the vascular dementia that he became very difficult, and it was rather self-destructive. So it not far from Hippocrates. Now Hippocrates is out a little bit, but Williams means that he had, as he began to really act out, he had more medical care, and that is really true. He had to be isolated even. Very sad, very, 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 very sad. And that also takes into account in the mutables, as I said, that's a little bit past block, so I won't even put block in there. But again, back to Vera, and oh, that's what it was, penal, which is slightly out of this. Okay, it's about here. Is, let me see if I got that right, is also running with, these things are all at the same place. Because they're all in the mutables. Frank and penal, I have dots by them, okay, are in there. Okay, so here we go. And look at this logic. It's gone. It's all affected by this disease and having all this stuff in here. I could go on and on. So, but instead I'm going to come back. So I'm back, and I did want to add one more asteroid, and this is really much more for certain forms of dementia, is the asteroid Spectre. Because in certain neurological conditions, and I think Parkinson's is actually one of these, and it might be because of the drugs, I'm not sure, but there is that hallucination factor. So one of the cool things about doing medical work is that we can really get into the finer details. I really didn't want to overwhelm you with this. I just wanted to show how we in medical astrology would approach something like this. I did a total workup to come up with all these notes. I had my list, but I really went through and did a total workup and then began to dissect from that point. I did the same thing for the other chart, and I may do that. I know Friday, I'll be doing that video today, is going to be for the full moon. But I think maybe next week or the week after, I'll try and do an Alzheimer or maybe another diabetes. There are so many medical charts on the file that sometimes when I don't know what to do, I'll just go, you know what? Let's just pull up a medical chart. So I hope this was informative. I hope that you got something from this. I hope that it will make all of you look at astrology a little bit differently. I did want to point out one more thing. I know that some of you might even ask this question. What about Neptune? Okay, and I thought that I had actually written something down here about Neptune. In this particular case, Neptune is not far from Tomlinson. It's a little far. It's about 4 degrees. It's very late in Leo, or fixed at this point, and it's running with Venus. And I will say this, that vascular dementia is about vascular, it's your blood, right? Well, Venus is also a blood factor. So I did want to point that out. I didn't do a lot of work on that. I could have. There's so many directions we could have gone. Believe me, you get into a medical chart, it's a rabbit hole. And I certainly didn't want to do that for this video because that would be totally confusing. So hopefully it made sense to you. Hopefully you learned something. And most importantly, it was some valuable information that you can use. So with that said, thank you for watching the video. And I'm going to leave you as I always do, that until we meet again, I wish you all only happy readings.